but we will be talking about voles and gophers, and we'll spend the most amount of time on gophers. Next slide. So this, if you double click that slide, Delise, it probably will play. It's a video.
That little fella's not working.
Not gonna work. Okay. Well, this gopher that you see, his name is Lucky, and he's been a kind of a lab gopher of mine for many years, and he's been released back into the wild. But the main attributes of gophers are is they live 3 to 5 years. They're vegetarians primarily. In fact, you could say they're ruditarians, but they like to eat above ground too. They come out at night and run around and relocate and hopefully meet their match. Next slide, please. So this is a good look at a gopher, and you can see those beautiful white teeth that as they get older, get longer, and those teeth grow their whole life long. And if they don't have something to chew on, those teeth will continue growing until they actually go underneath the gopher's body. You can see those two really front long claws that are the big diggers. And most gophers dig and use their flat heads as kind of a bulldozer. I wish I could show you a video, but it doesn't look like it's going to happen, but maybe we'll see one in real life on Saturday. Next slide. And so we're comparing the gopher and the mole here. And as you can see, they're almost the same size. Moles are a little bit smaller. But the big difference between them is, one, they have a complete species difference. Gophers are rodents and moles are in a completely different category. And also you can see a huge difference in their fur. The gophers have fur that runs from the front to the back, and the mole's fur is actually doesn't have a nap at all to it. Next slide. And this is about the biggest gopher you're going to find in California. In California, the species we have, the Thomas Wittman, is actually the smallest gopher in the United States. So in a way, we're lucky. But gophers also are pretty good at having young. They usually have only 1 or 2 litters a year, mostly in March and April. And the animals are territorial, and they'll fight for their territory. But when a litter of gophers is born, they are kept underground by their mom until they're weaned, and then she opens the burrow up, and they all have to come out and find new homes, and they'll never see their mom again. Next slide, please. So you're looking at, on the left, a gopher skeleton, on the right, a mole skeleton. And what's pretty obvious about the mole skeleton is that it's really not made for grinding plants whatsoever. It definitely looks like a Tyrannosaurus Rex. And the gopher one is a chopper and grinder. So that's another reason that I'm going to encourage you not to worry about moles too much unless they're in a lawn. Next slide. So this is on the UCSC farm, and this is a cover crop that just started. So the field was naked for a little while, and then this cover crop was planted. And after the field was plowed, gophers all retreated if they survived, to the roadway. And then what you're looking at, starting at the road and all the way up to like the middle of the picture, is one gopher's work. So they just kind of make their situation, their homes, and they just keep moving it and abandoning the beginning part. And that's going to be more important when we start talking about trapping. Next slide. And so here's the kind of sketch of what a gopher burrow looks like. And what you see mostly are just the one part on the top. which is the actual burrows that they make and move around with. The bottom part, which they say can 3 to 9 feet, usually what I see is maybe 1 to 4 feet at the most. The upper burrows are 6 feet, I'm sorry, 6 to 8 inches maximum in their depth. This bottom part is built by the female when she's pregnant, and she digs these three parts of the burrow. One is for food storage, one's the nest where the babies are born and weaned, and then on the right there is a what's called a latrine or a feces dump, because she closes off this whole burrow from the surface so there has to be a place for everything to happen. And the one thing that's missing, there's 2 things missing. One is air and one is water. Almost always a nest site is underneath a perennial bush or tree. And what they do is they just prune the roots a little bit to get a little water drip down there, and that's where they get their water. And gophers and moles are able to live with a very low air supply because they have extremely thin blood. In fact, they're hemophiliacs, and that's a good and bad thing. It enables them to have less air, but if they get injured, even in the slightest, they don't survive. Next slide. So here's another single gopher burrow system. And you can see it just starts at one place. Again, it started from the side and then it came towards the front of the screen. Next slide. And this is a nesting site. You can see it's underneath the perennial plant. There's a huge mound. Usually you see a giant mound because they have to excavate all that dirt underground. And you'll never see this without some kind of perennial plant above it. Next slide. Here's a series of gopher nests underneath some perennial plants on the left, some other plants, and then these 2 trees on the bottom, both are actually in the same yard, but both of them have nests under them. And you can see the trees aren't doing too well because of that. Next slide. This is actually a picture of a gopher that's running across a dirt field, and they really can move around a lot at night. This is actually a video, but we'll probably see a gopher on Saturday. Next slide. And here we're looking at a comparison between a mole mound and a gopher burrow entrance. One thing about moles is they never come above the ground if they can help it. So you never see an entrance mark on the actual mound of a mole, but you always will on the mound of a gopher. Next slide. I'm going to go through pretty fast because we got a lot of slides to go here. So again, here's just a drawing of a gopher mound and kind of how the gopher comes out of the tunnel. And when it does, it makes a crescent-shaped burrow. And you can always see the entrance. And the entrance is never in the middle of the burrow. It's always on the edge. Next slide. And this is a typical mole. A mole pushes a column of soil straight up out of the ground, and that's what makes that round volcano-like sign. And they also can swim just under the surface of moist soil. Next slide. So here on the left and the right are both mole burrows, and you can see they're distinctly different than gopher burrows in that there's no opening, and there's actually usually several mounds next to each other, which just connect the underground tunnel, which is about 6 to 8 inches deep, just like gophers. And to complicate things even more, sometimes gophers and moles share the same burrow. Next slide. Here's a mole surface trail, and you can see these after rain when they can just swim under there. Next slide. And this is a really large mole mound. Again, this is actually on the side of a dirt road. And moles can go underneath freeways. They're incredible diggers. And again, because moles have no nap in their soil, they can easily turn around and go backwards. Whereas gophers have to roll into a little ball to turn around because of the nap. And we'll see some of that. Next slide. And so here you see on the left, I'm pretty sure it's on your left, a classic crescent-shaped gopher mound. And on the right, on the bottom, is a classic mole mound. And you can actually see where those pieces of dirt were pushed straight up from the center. And the slide on the top is how close those two mounds are to each other. So these two animals are within feet of each other. So it can be confusing as to which animal you're working with. Next slide. So here's a nice picture of a broad-footed mole. We're not going to go too far into them because my feeling is in gardens and farms and vineyards, moles are actually good. They aerate the soil. They eat a lot of underground bugs like potato bugs and caterpillars that can be a problem. Their main diet is though worms, and there's a lot to know about moles I'm not going to go into, but one thing I'll share with you is that they don't have any eyes or ears. They used to years and years ago, but they evolved away from eyes and ears, and their feet also evolved into being incredible digging machines. There's a book you might want to check out at a library or something called Of Moles and Men, and that is a really fascinating book. Next slide. Here's the underside of a mole. You can see how powerful those front paws are. They can dig 200 feet in a day. Next. This is a video. We'll just go next. And so this is our third problem. Well, the second animal, it's a big problem. It's a vole. Now, voles are daytime animals, and they're called meadow mice. And they like to use gopher and mole burrows, which is why the picture in the center, you can see there's no soil on the surface, just holes. So they just open up these burrows that were left over from gophers and moles, and they just use those as their places to hide and store food. What the kind of damage they do mostly is they like to eat the bark off of trees, especially in vineyards. They can be a problem. Next slide. And they really like rock walls where they can hide in these warm rocks and then come out. And you can see there's little trails where they come out of their burrows. And one thing about voles is they love to stay on the trail. Next slide. So here's some damage. Again, you can see a vole colony in the bottom corner. You can see some chard on the upper left, and that's actually broccoli on the right. And this is actually down at Esalen where I work occasionally. And they had this problem. They couldn't figure out what was eating their plants. Turns out it was a vole colony, and they would just crawl up the plants and then eat their way back down. And it was hard for me to tell too, because they don't leave a lot of feces around. They just kind of do their destruction and disappear. Next. Here's more damage. This is on some kale again. And you can see on the bottom right, there's these two traps. And there's a trail coming right from under the plants right there that I'll show you a little bit more clearly in the next slide. Okay, so this is the main tool I use for voles. And it's you put a 10-penny nail through a hole in one of these little tiny mouse traps, and then you cover them with these covers that you can either make or you can get them online. And then the next slide will show you how I use them. So you can see there's the two vole holes. And so I put a trap right next to each of the holes, and I put a cover on it so a bird or a cat or anything won't get snapped. And you can see that this vole was actually going in when he got caught. Next. And here's some more setups. You can see I'm catching lots of voles. But what's interesting is not only am I catching voles, but I'm actually catching mice too. So the mice have invaded the vole hole to steal their food, and they seem to be coexisting somewhat. So one thing about voles is that they have a huge ability to reproduce. In fact, they can have 22 litters in 1 year. And by the time the first litter is starting to get old enough to have their own litters, they're it's only just a few weeks. So they end up getting into these huge colonies, kind of like lemmings. But what often happens with voles is when it seems like the problem is never ending. Like lemmings, usually diseases or predators or something finds these animals, and the population drops radically. I've also tried using hot peppers and castor oil in the vole holes, and that seems to help a little bit. They are daytime animals, so the best animals to have around are cats and daytime feline predators like red-shouldered and red-tailed hawks. Next. So there are some plants that gophers eat less. I've never known a plant that gophers wouldn't touch. So you can see this list here. By the way, I'm not going to just read it all, but all these slides are actually on my website, gopherslimited.com, under information. In fact, this whole slideshow, which this one is edited pretty severely, the whole thing untouched is on my website if you ever want to see it. But the basic thing is aromatic, herbaceous, drought-tolerant perennials like lavenders and sages and rosemary and thyme and oregano. Do I bait traps for voles? The question is no. Voles always follow the trail, so if you put the traps on the trail, you'll just catch them. I barely use bait for any of my traps, as you'll see as we go on. Next slide. So there are some crop strategies for gardeners and farmers, and one thing to do, especially for gophers, is alternate crops that attract gophers. Crops with tubers and crowns like artichokes and carrots and other things like that. Do they have a nice juicy root? Cover crop mixes, and the most common cover crop is bell beans and barley, or bell beans and oats. Don't have any food for gophers. So that's a good thing to cover crop with when you have an area that really has a lot of gophers. If you want to plant clovers, which are mostly planted in orchards, you will definitely attract gophers. And if you leave a lot of these native weeds like malva, poppies, plantain, oxalis, and crabgrass, all of which have either carrot-like or tuberous roots, you'll also be providing a lot of food for gophers. Next slide. Well, there is this one clover called sour clover, which actually is a good orchard clover. It has coumarin in its roots. Coumarin is actually the basic plant where they get coumadin, which is the blood thinner. And as I said earlier, gophers already have thin blood, so there might be a connection with this one being a gopher retardant. The nitrogen fixing, it reseeds readily, sometimes too readily. It could be a weed problem. It attracts beneficial insects. And as I said, it's great for orchards. So you can find this on the web, but there is an insectary that actually carries this down in Santa Maria. I forget the name of it, but if you want to know, or if you can't find it on the web, just give me a call. Next slide. And this is one of the least favorite plants of gophers, which has given it its reputation as a good gopher deterrent. But actually, as you can see, gophers are living right next to these. Gopher perch, euphorbia. Next slide. So I like to use barriers when it comes to gophers, and we've been doing a lot of these. We call them vertical barriers. Sometimes you don't want to completely underwire something, or you have a large garden and you don't know what to do. And so we've been making these vertical barriers like you see on the right. And they've been actually very effective. And there's lots more information on our website, gopherslimited.com, about how to do this. Lots and lots of pictures. And we have a lot of landscapers that work with us on this. So when it comes to underwiring beds, of course, underwiring before you lay the wood down is going to be the most foolproof. And then on the bottom one, you can see that this just has gopher wire laying in here. It's just stapled on here. And this is prone to failure because gophers just find the edges and push up, push staples right out. So I always recommend like screwing some boards over this so it locks it in place. Next slide. So here's a really nice wired bed. They took the wire up and put it in between two layers so you can see the possibility of a gopher or anything getting into this bed. Also, because it's 2x6s tall, prevents anything from crawling next to it. And often gophers will build mounds right next to a bed like this. And pretty soon they put enough dirt that they're digging out from under it that they have a ramp to just get right over. So I recommend going high or putting a 2x6 like seat all around it so they can't climb up over it. Next slide. So here's a bunch of beds being built. These were all underwired. And this is kind of a great technique. Next slide. Here's some more. I mean, the ways you can build these things is pretty open-ended. I really like the fact that you can add either remake cloth or some kind of frost cloth over the top to make little mini greenhouses out of them, or keep birds and bugs out. And you can see the bottom right one is what I mean by putting a seat around the edge. Nothing can climb up and around the bottom of that seat. Next slide. So gopher wire, there's two kinds basically. There's galvanized wire and stainless steel wire. And I actually am the manufacturer of most of the stainless steel wire and the round stainless steel baskets that you can find locally or on my website. And the big advantage of stainless over galvanized is the fact that it lasts. Well, we didn't even know how long it's lasted. We've been manufacturing it for around 10 years, and people have taken baskets out of the ground that have been in the ground for the whole time, 7 or 8 years, and they look brand new. So that's one of the beauties of stainless. The galvanized wires do have a tendency to break down over time. But you know, if it's price you're looking at, then you would go with a cheaper one. But actually, the way a lot of people are thinking these days, it's better to pay more for something that lasts forever than it does for something that will just disintegrate. Next slide. So here are some more more of the stainless steel things, we have these things called garden beds on the bottom right, and we have these giant baskets for trees that are not that deep rooted. We sell it in rolls and baskets. Next slide. And so here's a, I don't know if you guys can see my cursor. Can you see my cursor? Okay.
No, sorry, we can't.
All right. What we're looking at here are some of these vertical barriers that we put around vineyards and farms and stuff. And they're actually very, very great for people that just want to stop having these problems. Because these barriers go underground 18 inches with a bend out to the bottom, and like you see on the right corner, 6 inches to the side. So when a gopher gets to the bottom, he doesn't keep going. And on the surface, there's also 18 inches of wire and a 4-inch bend at the top. What this keeps out, and it's attached to a deer fence. And what this will be a good barrier for is any gophers, moles, rats, bunnies, and unfortunately not ground squirrels. But we'll talk a little bit more about them later. Next slide. And one of the big tricks about these vertical barriers is how do you terminate it if it doesn't go completely around something? Because sometimes we put a vertical barrier up like on a vineyard, and we only need it on one side because it's got a natural area, like a field on one side that has tons of gophers in it. So we started thinking about how to terminate this, and we realized that gophers are always following right along the barrier once they approach it. And so we make this like spiral at the ends, either that or by gates or just at the end there. And so what happens is the gopher gets to the end and then he gets redirected to the wire again, and then he just goes back, and they just keep going back and forth. What was that question about galvanized wire? Anyway, next slide.
Can I ask, since we're doing questions, can I feed you a few that have come in?
Yeah, I haven't been seeing them on my screen.
No, because they're in the Q&A. It's a different window.
Okay.
So catching multiple gophers at the same time, well, within the same territory. This person thinks they're supposed to be solitary, but he's getting multiple gophers. Can you explain why?
Well, often because gophers will always reinvade a hole or a burrow system where the gopher that lived there before was caught. And there's also traveling burrows, as well as burrows that just connect the parts of a gopher's home. Traveling burrow is about as big as your fist, and you can find it along plant rows in beds, or you can find it along orchards and vineyards right along the plant rows. And those burrows are really hard to deal with, but those are being used by multiple gophers. And I'm not sure how they avoid each other, but they do. Next.
How deep does the vertical barrier have to go? And what's the cost per foot?
Well, the wire costs, let's see, the wire costs a little under $1 a foot. And usually we do 16 inches deep with a bend to the outside on the bottom, and then 16 inches above the ground with a bend on the top. So this is a 4-foot roll we're using.
Great. Okay, let's move on.
Ready? So cats are pretty handy when it comes to problem animals, especially gophers and voles especially. Project Purr, which is I'm not sure what's happening with them right now. I know they just closed their store in town, but they rehome cats that are kind of on their own, feral cats. And I actually have caught a bunch of cats for them, and it's a really good situation on a farm. As you can see, this gold tabby on the right here was a farm cat at UCSC, and that cat had one or two gophers every single day. Next. Dogs are not the best solution for gophers because they tend to dig bigger holes than gophers do. Although they can be fun. There is one dog, however, that will wait until the gopher pops its head up and grab him, and that's the Australian Shepherd. And there might be a couple other dogs that are like that too, but most of the larger breeds will just make giant holes. Next slide. Now, gopher snakes, a lot of people ask me, gosh, should I get a bunch of gopher snakes and see what happens? And there's two things wrong with that. One is gopher snakes are protected, and the other is gopher snakes only eat one gopher every 3 to 6 weeks. And then they just eat and then sleep for a while. So they're really not the kind of animal that's going to reduce populations at all. Next. Now this animal, this is a red-shouldered hawk, I believe, and perches can really help them catch voles and sometimes gophers, but gophers are pretty wary of hawks. So perches are really great. I really like perches that have like a 12-inch by 12-inch platform on the top, because they like to bring their prey up there and eat it in peace, and then they just get used to it and like it. Next. Also, great blue herons and egrets are eating gophers now. Kind of new for their diet. I don't know why they ever started eating that instead of fish, but they do. And we often see, actually at the farm, we often see a male and female pair that go out there hunting together for them. And they have a hard time killing gophers, so they actually bring them up in the air about 40 or 60 feet and drop them to kill them or knock them senseless, and then they swallow them whole. Next slide. Now this is the gopher getter of choice. Actually, Delise, if you keep clicking, the text will come up on this slide. Yeah. So barn owls, they range up to 2 miles from a nest box, and there's usually 2 adults and 2 chicks in a box. And barn owl family, 2 adults and 2 chicks, are known to eat as many as 1,000 gophers a season. They eat about 2 a day. There's one more click on there. There you go. And so they're really good, but a lot of people put barn owl boxes up and expect them to eat gophers right under the box. And for some reason, they almost never touch gophers that are really close to their boxes. Next slide. Now, making boxes is really important to make them in a way that the main predator of the barn owl doesn't get killed. The main predator, surprisingly enough, is the great horned owl. And you can see this box on the upper right actually has a perch on it. That was one of the first boxes I built. And I built 75 of these and put them all over Santa Cruz County, and then had to go back and cut the perch off every one of them because the great horned owls can reach in and get the babies. So nowadays, the box on the left has a divider in it, so the babies are safe. And there's a clean out panel on the side, and the same thing with this one on the right. Next slide. So we're looking at Alex Godby right here holding this barn owl. She's the director of a nonprofit called the HungryOwl.org. Now, the Hungry Owl actually saves the lives of owls that have been poisoned, especially in agricultural and vineyard areas. And you can see this box in the lower left is a box that they have made at a nearby school. price is probably a little low right there. And they sell them to support their nonprofit. And they have some great videos, a lot of cameras inside owl boxes with babies and stuff. Really interesting. Next slide. So the one thing about barn owl boxes is you have to clean them. And when you clean them out, because a lot of the diet of barn owls is field mice, and field mice have this virus called hantavirus, that dust from the mice fur, and because they just leave a lot of the skin and stuff inside their boxes as nesting material. So when you clean it out, it's all dry and dusty, and if you breathe that dust, then you're putting yourself in danger. So I make these bases for the boxes that are called a flagpole base, where if you pull the top bolt out, you can lower the box to the ground and then rinse the inside with water before you clean it out, so you're not exposing yourself to dust. Of course, you have to wear protective equipment too. Now, this box on the right actually has everything wrong with it. It's got a perch just made for a great horned owl to eat the babies. The baby owls can even fall out of this box before they're fledged. And it's attached to a tree, which means that raccoons and squirrels and all kinds of animals, including ants and other bugs, can actually get into the box. So that's a really bad design. The best design is something that's pretty much standing out by itself. Next slide. If you have one of these in your yard, a big old date palm, then you won't be needing to build a barn owl box, because it's one of the barn owl's favorite roosts and nesting areas. And in the bottom right corner, you see what is left of a couple of gophers that barn owls ate, and they regurgitate these pellets because they can't digest them. And a lot of kids have taken these pellets apart and placed the bones on a piece of paper at camp just to check it out. Next slide. So here are some repellents I like to use. Molmax is one of my very favorite ones, and it comes in a liquid and a powder. And the thing about Molmax is it's made of 100% castor oil, and castor oil is just bitter. It's not poisonous whatsoever, and they just don't like it. It's sticky and smelly, and it makes things unpleasant for them. These other repellers have things like blood meal and egg whites that are rotten. They call it putrescent egg white. And these two on the bottom, these critter ritter ones, one's a liquid and one's a dry thing, are made of the hot part of chili pepper, capsaicin, and also the oil of black pepper. So they're also really good deterrents for all kinds of things, including cats and dogs, whatever's eating a tree or on a tree. You can use critter ritter for. You can use critter ritter under your hood as a spray if you're starting to get mice and rats under your hood eating your wiring. More about that later. Next. So there are some sonic things that people are really fond of. You can click it twice more to these. So they can be effective for a short period of time, because after a while, gophers do get used to them. You can spend $30, you can spend $20 or $10 or 15 cents and get kind of the same effect. Next slide. So as you can see, here's one in the ground with a Gopher Mound right next to it. So they're not 100% effective. And after a little while, the annoying sound goes away. Next slide. And so some people use smoke bombs, but what I've found lately is that probably because of all the forest fires and smoke in the air, gophers tend to block their burrows almost immediately when they smell smoke. So I've not seen these to be very effective lately. Next slide. Well, that's the fun of the smoke bombs, but like I said, they're not very effective. Next slide. This is a really old machine that has been recreated called the Mole Cat. It actually uses a 22 caliber blank to blow up in the animal's face. I don't really recommend it. It costs about $100 for one of these too. Next slide. Then there's the Gopher Torch. Some people use that, but again, this is a little overkill and it does make a mess. Next slide. You need to have one of these to carry it around. Next. But in vineyards, it can be a really good tool because, like I said, there's a common burrow that goes right along the vine rows. And because you never tractor across the vine rows, you end up with these burrows that gophers can run up and down, but you never see them. So this can collapse that burrow. If you're going to use this machine, you have to alert the police first because it sounds like a shotgun. Next slide. Next slide. That's a video showing that these things can start fires. There's another machine that actually they have one of these at UCSC. It's called the PERC machine, and it injects carbon monoxide, cooled carbon monoxide gas into burrows. Now, in my business, I don't use these because I don't believe in using poisons, and carbon monoxide is a poison. Next slide. This is another model I don't recommend. Next slide. Now, this is a piece of equipment that we actually manufacture at Gophers Limited, and it uses carbon dioxide, not carbon monoxide, but kind of the same effect. It floods the burrows with carbon dioxide, eliminating the oxygen, and so the animals don't usually survive. This is especially effective in wetter areas like lawns in the winter or lawns that are irrigated. Next slide. These are videos which won't show, so next slide. That last slide was called gopher jugging, where you take a jug of water and you put it in a gopher hole that gophers have recently been popping their heads up. And for some reason, the gophers go into the mouth of the jug and you end up catching the gopher in the jug. You can look it up on YouTube. Just put gopher jugging in your thing. So gopher traps were first patented in 1870. And then the most common trap in our area, called the Maccabee Trap, was patented and used to protect Zephyr Maccabee's almond orchards in Los Gatos. And they're still making these traps today. Next. So if you have a situation like this, it's time to plow or rototill this whole area because you'll never be able to figure out where all the burrows are and where they go. Next, it's always good to know when it's time to start fresh. So the key to catching gophers is finding the freshest run. And usually the freshest run is the darkest colored run. You can see this one on the right is the dark one. That's where you would trap. And on the left, you can see that dark run there. Next slide. So again, find the fresh burrow. See how much darker that one is than the one below it? Next slide. And so once again, here's the gopher pushing the soil out and making a mound on one side, and then leaving a round plug that you can see in the picture on the right, which is a little bit darker. The clearer this plug is, the more likely it's new. Next slide. So basically, gophers are most active in the early morning. In fact, if you get out there early enough, you'll find out that their burrows are open and they're kind of cleaning everything out. And then around 4 o'clock in the afternoon, they start getting active again. So you can trap in the evening too. If you trap early in the spring, prior to the first litters, you will be eliminating a huge part of the breeding population. So most people just put everything away in the winter, but in the early spring, or even starting in January, or all through winter, if you can, trap those gophers, and you'll be really eliminating the breeding population. So during the fall, after you plant your cover crops, like you saw in that earlier picture, is also another great time because you can see the burrows from a long place away. After it rains or after a field irrigation, after you till, roll, harrow, or mow is really good times to trap. And during other times in the field when, if you're a farmer, you're doing your morning crop count, or you're moving irrigation pipe, or during harvest. Now, the biggest mistake I see in farms and gardens is people keep their gopher traps in buckets in the barn or in a shed and not in the ground. And I recommend always keeping your traps in the ground in active burrows. And that's the only way I know to really keep up with it. Next slide. Here's a gopher trap museum in Watsonville. It's at the fairgrounds, just to give you an idea of how much effort's gone into this. Next slide. So there's two kinds of trapping theories. Main burrow trapping, where you dig down to the main burrow, which is 6 inches deep, and that's a pretty big hole, set 2 or more traps and stake them so they can't get pulled into the burrows. You cover or bury the excavation, and then you monitor by digging everything back up again and checking it. And that takes a lot of time and can be pretty destructive in landscapes. So the alternative is surface trapping, which is what I highly recommend. You just open the burrow entrance, you set the trap, and you can monitor the trap from above ground. The reason this works is because gophers always plug up the burrow entrance, always. And if they don't, then they're not there anymore. Next slide. So you can click this a couple more times. This is the dig to the main burrow method, which I'm not advocating. It just takes too much energy. Next slide. This is Zephyr Maccabee on the bottom right, and these are some other traps that you see around a lot that aren't as effective as the method I'm going to show you. Next slide. This again is another deep burrow thing. These are called box traps on the right. Next slide. Ooh, I wish you could see this. This is a video again.
Yeah,
But
sorry.
you're not going to see it. You know, I did send the videos along in the Dropbox.
I'm sorry. At this point,
And
I think
here's
go through.
an obvious sign that these burrows are plugged. You can see that here's the opening, and it's just plugged solid. This one's plugged solid. And this one, this is a Christie box, usually an irrigation box. That a lot of people always complain that these boxes are filled up. And the reason is because gophers like to follow the pipes. This is where your irrigation timer is and valves are. They like to follow the pipes because it's an easy way to dig, and they end up in these boxes. And they can't stand to see light in the opening. So what they do is they fill the whole box with dirt, because there's a hole right here on the lid. And the hole is made to put a lock on the box. The gophers fill it up to get rid of that light. Next slide. This actually is a great video. Oh, this thing worked? Too bad. Can you try double clicking on that?
Yeah, not happening.
Too bad, it's not linked. Again, sorry about these technical problems, but you can see this video on, you can see it two places, on my website, or you can go to my YouTube channel, which is just go to YouTube and go to Gophers Limited, and you can see all the videos I want to show you right there in one place, including videos on how to improve your trapping so you are not missing them anymore. Next slide. And if you come on Saturday, you'll learn all about the cinch trap and how I trap gophers. These are the cinch traps that I use exclusively for gophers and moles. And you can see the main burrow is like 6 inches deep, and there's an exit tunnel. It's always kind of at a slant, and that's where the burrow is. And then they leave these holes that look like they're just open holes, but they're actually plugged up lower, called feeding holes. And you can often see that there's a circle of grass missing around them. Can't really trap in those holes because of the way the trap is. It'll just, the jaws of the trap will be on the bottom of the burrow and won't trap anything. But the right way is the way to go. And there's lots of videos about that on YouTube, Gophers Limited. Next slide. So there's 2 cinch traps, cinch gopher trap and cinch mole trap. And you can buy these traps from us or San Lorenzo Lumber, or lots of places in town have them now. And you want to get the cinch mole trap for gophers, because remember I said that
Gophers Limited phone.
I said that let me turn that off, that we have the smallest gophers in the United States. So this trap is way too big for our gophers. The distance between the trigger and the jaw is almost the same size as our gophers, whereas this one is perfect size for a humane kill here. Next slide. So here's a set of a bunch of holes here, and you can see you have these outlying ones and you have this main one here. There usually is a little cave underneath this one. So I like always choose one of these outside burrows. Next slide. Now, if you end up with a bunch of whole hair, this is gopher hair on this trap, and a little bit of blood, then like I said, you probably got this gopher because they can't handle any kind of injury. Next slide. And this is what it looks like at the end of the day. Usually I put the gophers back in the burrow, but we were at a park and they didn't want to do that. So we just, we did our demo, we set 12 traps and we picked up, we got about 50% on the trap here. Next slide. Roger Baldwin is one of my favorite gopher observers and professors. And I'll show you a little bit about what he found out on the next couple slides. Next slide. Well, he took these 3 traps, Maccabee Trap, this trap here, which is modeled after the box trap, which is called the black hole, and this trap, the Cinch Trap, and he did an efficacy study on them, and he found out that, you can see the numbers, that the Cinch Trap actually catches twice as many gophers as the other traps, and that's usually with 1 trap as opposed to 2 traps. Next slide. And then there's this other trap. I don't want to go into this. Let's just go to the next slide. Then people always think about putting attractants on their traps. I never do, and this shows you why I don't. because there's 100 traps. They used 100 traps, and I can't really see the bottom of this slide, but they used like 4 different kinds of attractants, and they found that the difference was almost negligible. In fact, they found the difference was not even important. So it's not about the baits, it's about the fact that using a gopher's natural tendency to close their burrows is what really works. Next slide, please.
Hey, Thomas, can we ask a few questions?
Sure.
Okay, we want a confirmation. You don't bait vole traps, correct?
No.
Okay. Owl pellets, are you likely to get hantavirus from that? Do you know?
It's possible. What schools do usually is I think they microwave them.
Delicious.
Well, they have to do something to kill any virus, and I guess microwaves might do it. I don't think freezing would do it.
Okay, there were a couple of questions about trees and large perennials, and is there a size that they're big enough that they're safe from gophers? And what would that size be?
Well, in my experience, I've seen huge trees felled by gophers. But certain trees are more vulnerable than others, like fig trees are the #1 gopher food. I had a whole field full of fig trees when I first started farming, and I lost every single one of them. They were only like 4 years old, but I've seen. I think if once a fig tree gets to be 10 years old, it's probably safe. As far as most fruit trees, young trees like apples and pears and those kind of trees, I think 3 or 4 years old. A lot of people are planting with baskets now. And speaking of baskets, some people are really concerned about the fact that as a tree grows, that the basket could girdle the roots. And in fact, the people that make the galvanized traps put less galvanizing on them just so that the traps disintegrate even faster, not the traps, the baskets. With the stainless baskets that I make, my latest, or my theory is, and I'm pretty sure this is true, is because it's a welded basket, it's not a woven basket, that if a tree root was growing and putting force on the welds, it could actually break the welds of the basket and be okay.
Okay.
Anything else?
Well, that was good. Yeah, a couple more. Molmax, does that work for gophers too?
Molmax?
Yeah.
Yes. Gophers really don't like castor oil. And you can actually buy castor oil at a drugstore for half the price that you could buy castor oil at a store that sells plants and stuff. And you can buy 100% castor oil. In fact, if you're buying a castor oil product to save plants, and it will save plants, look for 100% castor oil. Molmax usually is 100%, but a lot of other ones are like 20%, even as low as 10% castor oil. So you're just buying water then. But if you buy it from a drugstore, you just put it in a fertilizer sprayer and just drench whatever you want to protect.
Okay, let's do one more. It's a series actually. How long do you leave the trap? How often do you check the trap? And how often do you move the trap?
Okay, we're going to go into that in just a minute. But the basic answer is, if you're using a gopher trap like the cinch trap that uses the not the theory, but the reality that gophers are always going to close their burrows, if that trap hasn't been tripped or covered by a gopher within 24 hours, then you move it. They're most effective in the first 24 hours. And so if it's your gardener, you're farming, and like you're leaving your traps in the field, then you can always just move them around every day when you're out there. And that's the best thing to do. But 24 hours and then they're not effective anymore.
Okay, let's move on then. Thanks.
Okay, well, you can look this up on the web if you want to.
Gopher pie.
So how much time do I have left?
You have 15 minutes.
Okay, good. Well, tree squirrels have been a major problem to a lot of people lately. If you have bird feeders, you definitely will be attracting squirrels. So I always say, try to find a way to block the squirrel highway. If you can trim trees so they can't go from tree to tree, or if they're on top of a fence, you can put a sticky barrier up there using like tanglefoot or something sticky, which they don't like. You can remove or relocate problem squirrels, although if there is a problem with relocating squirrels, especially gray squirrels, which are protected. If you're caught relocating a gray squirrel into a public land, you can be fined $1,000. So I would say to be careful what you do when it comes to relocating. It's better to try to figure out some kind of barrier. Next slide. Now, these are some squirrel barriers that have been used for tree squirrels. These are electric wires, and it's made with a low voltage fence charger, like the one they use for keeping chickens and stuff. And what happens is this is actually is the squirrel, because it can't really walk too much on here, tends to bounce down here, and then it gets a little shock and pretty much keeps them out. This little panel here goes where holes are, or pipes go underneath your fence to stop that from happening. We can go into this much farther if you want to, but not today. This is your California ground squirrel, public enemy #1 in ranch and farmlands in California. And they're kind of cute, but there are some disadvantages. One is they carry fleas, because unlike the other animals we were talking about today, they're communal animals. They do everything together. And they have assigned roles. Some of them watch. If you're out in the field where there's ground squirrels, you can hear them chirping. At least one will be chirping if he sees you, and that's the warning signal to other squirrels that there's some kind of predator or problem around. But they're very communal. Next slide. In fact, they even have pizza parties. Next slide. So the burrows are a lot larger than other things. They can be pretty deep. I've seen them go deeper than 4 feet. One of the advantages is they only breed once a year, and they have 78 per litter. So in terms of lowering populations, and they do hibernate every year too. At least some of these years when it's too warm, they don't hibernate anymore. So there's many ways to deal with this, but none of them are pleasant. They eat grasses and plants in the spring, and they change their diet to seeds and nuts in the fall for their estivation. Next slide. Here's a ground squirrel burrow. It's big enough for the hoof of a horse or a cattle to go into, and that's one of the big problems with them on rangelands, is they can break the leg of a large animal. Next slide. And they eat the bark of trees, or they're really a big problem in orchards. Next slide. So here's the thing that first one trapping with a kill trap is out. It's not kill traps or body gripping traps cannot be used in California for ground squirrels. The ag commissioner does sell gas cartridges that you can fumigate the burrows with. They just put out smoke and the smoke follows the burrows down and stuff. There is a bait called road troll, which actually is just made out of corn cobs, which can be helpful. Habitat modification is one of the best things. Get rid of piles of wood that they love to be on, destroy the burrows. Some people that have cattle and horses will feed the horses right on their burrows so that they're constantly getting stepped on and stuff. There's this rodent torch thing which explodes underground, and then a lot of people like to invite people with pellet guns, or if you're way out in the suburbs, not the suburbs, in the rural areas, a lot of people like shooting. Next slide. But there is a trap that actually works for these guys, and it's called the Black Fox trap, and it's from this company called the Trap Maker in Reading. And I've sold a lot of these to farmers, and if used properly, they can be very effective. The way you have to use this trap, though, is you can't leave it set overnight. You put the trap out near a bait pile, and you have to keep replenishing that bait pile next to the trap with the trap locked closed so nothing can get in it for 5 to 7 days until the bait pile is gone. And because these squirrels are communal, they get into a frenzy when the bait pile starts getting low. So when that's happening, then you put the trap on the bait pile, open the doors, and in one morning you can catch a whole colony. It's really effective. Next slide. And this is just a better look at the trap. Next slide. So unfortunately, once you have a trap full of these squirrels, there's only one humane way I know of eliminating all these squirrels. Now remember, these guys have fleas, and there have been cases of bubonic plague attributed to their fleas. In fact, there was a couple of cases in Monterey just a couple of years ago. So you want to not wear some gloves, pop these in this box. This box is made so that you can fumigate with an auto exhaust, or I often just use carbon dioxide, which is the Humane Society's way to euthanize these squirrels. They just kind of go to sleep and that's it. Next slide. So there are some barriers. In fact, if you look between the farm and the arboretum, you can see these barriers that are up. They're trying to prevent the ground squirrels from moving around. Barriers can be semi helpful. Next slide. And here's a rodinator. I won't go into this, but you can find it on the website. Next slide. And this is a really effective tool. It's expensive, but it's being used a lot in places. Actually, the university has one of these too. And it just fills the burrows up with sand and water. The water goes away and the sand stays there, and the burrow is blocked forever because the sand is so fine that the squirrels can't redig the burrows. Next slide. This is an unpleasant looking trap, but has been used. Next slide. And then there's this invader from the Sierras that's coming down here. I know someone that lost all their avocados to these guys. So we are getting, as climate changes, we're getting more predators or problem animals. Next slide. And so bunnies, critter ritter again is a good way to stop them. Just a low chicken wire fence is all that's needed. Or you can use an electric fence. Next slide. Trying to get quickly to my rats. Here we go. So we have 3 rats in Santa Cruz. We have the cute dusky-footed wood rat on the left. We have the black rat, also known as the roof rat, in the middle, and the Norwegian rat or Norway rat on the right. The Norway rat you don't see too much except in urban areas. The black rat you see a lot. Oh, thanks. The thing about black rats is that you see that bird feeder right under it, now it's all chewed. That's because they really like plastic. In fact, black rats are pretty responsible for all the car problems because the wiring is now made with an edible thing, an edible insulation covering. So that's why we're having trouble with cars and wiring and rats and mice. Now the dusky-footed wood rat also is a protected animal, and it's kind of cute. And they make these giant wood houses like you see on the left. And the one way to get them away from your garden or farm is to just eliminate those nests. And when you're pulling them apart with a forklift or something, be sure to tie your pant legs at the bottom so that they won't run up your pants, which has happened to me. Next slide. So exclusion, there's lots of ways to stop rats from getting into buildings. Food sources, if you have chickens, you got rats, and you'll have to deal with them another way. If you poison them, then you'll just have another problem. And just out of interest, rats destroy 20% of the world's food supply every year. Next slide. So here are some common traps. The Victor traps with the big trigger is actually a very effective trap and doesn't require any bait on it. And the regular old Victor traps that everyone knows about, people probably know that rats are delicate enough to lick all the peanut butter off of them without setting the trap off. I always tie a walnut onto the trigger with a rubber band or a light string, and so they have to pull on it, and that almost always gets them. The black trap, the third one from the left, is actually today's newest kind of rat trap, and it's incredibly effective. Again, another thing about that trap is it needs to be stabilized, just like the wooden rat traps. You can see at the bottom right, you can see on those wires that go into the attic there, that's called Romex wires. See all that dark color and all the feces around? That's really classic rat sand. They're kind of dirty animals. They don't clean their fur. But you can see these traps kind of worked. And they didn't have any bait on them. They're just put right in the way of the traps. Rats really like to go along the edges of walls. And if you put a trap in the middle of a room, you'll never get them. Now this UV light on the left is a really great tool for figuring out where rats are getting in, because rats dribble urine constantly, and their urine is full of phosphorus, and it glows under a black light. So you can take a black light, you can get them on the web pretty easily, walk around your house or chicken coop or whatever and see the rat trails very obviously. Next slide.
We are running out of time on this jolly note. Shall we end at rats and then talk about your class on Saturday?
Sure. So like I said, set them in the path, leave them on set for the first couple of days. tie the date, barrier methods, don't trap non-target animals. Next slide. On the right, you can see another way to trap rats in the attic, find out how they get out, and screw traps to the wall. Next slide. These electric rat traps are excellent, and they're really easy to clean up from. Next slide. And you can see the rats come out very stiff. They're all really good. Now, about in the middle, you can see that dove that got caught in a rat trap. Not good. The way you can avoid that is to get one of these boxes like you see on the left or on the right or down below that you can put rat traps in and not catch non-target species. Next slide. Now, if you go to the web and you look up bucket rat traps, you'll find hundreds of varieties of these traps, and they are really, really effective. Next slide. Oh, never mind. This is a video of a rat trap. Next slide. And next one. This one, the A24 Rotten Mousetrap with a counter. It's expensive, but it's called the A24 because it catches 24 rats or mice on one CO2 cartridge, and is used a lot in island pest control because they don't have time or the energy to monitor. Next. That's just how they work. Next. That's a video. Next. I guess we're about done here. About the, this is the biggest problem. Leave your hood up if you're getting this problem. Seal off rat hiding places if you can. And we actually do carry a device that you can put under your hood that'll stop this from happening. Next. And here are some of the things I used under the hood of the cars. This tape is actually made by Toyota. And I think that's probably good enough for now.
Thank you, Thomas. That was incredibly informative. And we have a couple of questions.
Here, let's go.
But before we do that, though, I'd like to mention that anybody who did not get their question answered and would like to really understand how to get involved with this down and dirty rat trapping and gopher trapping, there is plenty of room in our class, 10 o'clock Saturday morning. So go to centerforagroecology.ucsc.edu and we'll put a link in the chat for you if you would like to pre-register for that.
And I highly recommend the in-person class. I mean, there's one thing to look at a bunch of slides and stuff. Another thing to be able to walk the field and I can show you different mounds and what they look like and exactly how to trap. And we'll set a bunch of traps. In fact, I might set a bunch of traps the night before so that we have some caught when we get there. So I recommend it. It'll be fun.
So we have a few questions, and those of you who can stay on, thanks for staying. If you can't, don't worry, we're going to send the slides. We're going to send the slides with links to the videos, and we're going to send this recording. So you'll hear everything Thomas said, and you can review it at your leisure. So a lot of people are asking about the Gopher Hawk, which is another type of trap. Have you used that? Do you have an opinion?
Yeah, that company actually sent me a couple of Gopher Hawks just to try out. And, you know, there's a couple things I like about them, and a couple things I don't. One thing that I like about them is like I was saying earlier, you don't have to dig a big hole. You just use this probe that comes with the trap and find the main tunnels. And then they have another part that opens the tunnel just wide enough for the Gopher Hawk to fit in. And then you're in a tunnel and the trap is multi-directional. In other words, you usually don't know which side the gopher's on in a tunnel. But with the Gopher Hawk, it doesn't matter. From either direction, it catches them. For me personally, and because I have a business that constantly in people's front lawns and back lawns, the Gopher Hawk is kind of like a big object sticking out of the ground. So just in terms of the way it looks, I don't really use it that much, but I have heard a lot of good things about it. And because it's multi-directional and you don't have to dig a big hole, those are really good things.
So good for a backyard garden, maybe not a farm.
Yep.
Somebody would like to know if have-a-heart traps work for rats.
Oh yeah, you can catch rats live very easily. Have-a-hearts, any small trap. There's a trap that I really like called the Happy Trap. And the Happy Trap, you can buy it at San Lorenzo Lumber. And it's this kind of wire cage that's really inexpensive, but incredibly effective at catching animals, especially rats. They make a small have-a-heart that catches rats. And the problem with catching a rat live is they're really incredibly aggressive. If you pick the trap up, they'll definitely try to bite you. And then you have a rat in the trap. But I'm not sure what your intentions are after that. I mean, if you're going to let it go somewhere, which personally I don't care, as long as it's not in someone's backyard. But it is hard to deal with it once you have it in the trap, because then you have to figure out what you're going to do next.
Okay. If one is trapping the Traveling Burrow Run in a big field, is it one trap work better than another, or does it matter?
Traveling burrow, oh, the larger burrow, yeah. Well, I still use the Cinch Trap in that situation. Depending on the scale, mostly. If the scale is you have this a garden and you find one of those, I mean, you can just, some people just take a shovel handle and open it up and collapse it. It's only going to be like 6 inches deep at the most. So you just stick your shovel handle down in there, find the burrow, and just start pulling up until you can, till you collapse the whole thing or most of it. Because as soon as you collapse a section of it, obviously the gopher has to come to the surface to remake that burrow, and that's your cue to put a trap there.
Okay. So can you speak to this? This is my question too. How do you keep those cinch traps from getting rusty and unable to, respond quickly? Is there a maintenance protocol?
There is. In fact, I get about 5-6 years out of each of my traps, and I have thousands of them. And there's only one part of the trap that you really have to be concerned about, and that are those 2 pins, the set pins. When it's new, they work fine, but when they get rusty, they kind of rub against each other and they don't go off as easily. In fact, there is I think, yeah, there is a whole video on maintaining cinch traps on my YouTube channel.
Cool.
Which is good, but mostly I always wear gloves, and before I set the trap, I always like burnish or just pull my gloves along those pins to rub any rust off. That's basically it. The rest of the trap, sometimes the springs will break or this or that. Then you have to get a different trap. But for the most part, it's in the pins, and I'll definitely demonstrate that.
Okay, that'll be great. And will you be bringing any equipment to purchase at the class?
You know what? Probably not. All my sales go through my office, which is very close to the university. It's in the Sash Mill.
Okay.
And the Sash Mill is just off River Street behind Patagonia. And I have a person there who's the office manager. Her name is Brooke, and she does all the sales and everything. Or she can, we also sell a ton of stuff off our website if you just want it at your doorstep.
Okay.
So that's basically the thing. Usually I just don't bring a lot of stuff to the demos anymore because people are so into shopping online or just going to my store.
All right. Well, we're 10 minutes over. I'm gonna let everybody go. And Thomas, I really appreciate what you're sharing all this great information. And I look forward to seeing you on Saturday. I hope lots of you sign up for that class as well.
Okay, good. And one last thing is our office number, if anyone wants to just call Brooke and see if she can get some equipment or something, or if you ever want to schedule a consult or anything, or
Oh, so you come to people's houses and trap gophers?
oh yeah, we trap all over Santa Cruz County and even over
Not
the
just
air.
farms. Great to know. What's the
we-
number? I'll text it.
The number is 831-335-2400.
Okay.
We're right behind Stores Winery, in case you like wine.
All right.
Thanks
Thanks everybody for your
Please.
patience with the tech issues. And Thomas, we'll talk to you soon. Thank you so much.
Sounds good.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.